I'm an old dog. So here's number 5. Answer the following, true or false. A researcher wants to test the hypothesis that college students weigh less on average than the average American. The sample mean of 80 students who were weighed was found to be 142 pounds. P-value is 0.03. This means that if if the mean of all students' weight is 160, then it's this hard talk again. All right, what are they saying? The p-value is 0.03. And this means that if the mean is 160, then there would be a 3% chance. They're saying that same thing again. Yeah, that's what the p-value is. It's the chance this would happen by luck. That's exactly it, right? Like the chance I'm going to flip all those heads by luck, it's not possible. So that's what p-value is. When they start saying that kind of stuff, you just say yes. That's right. I don't know if that's helpful or not. True, false. Hypothesis test was conducted. New HIV vaccination reduces the risk of contracting the HIV virus. The implication of type 2 error. Okay, we can do that, yeah. So what's type 2 error? You guys have that on your sheet, your exam 3 notes. It's number 6 on the back. Number 5. It says type 2 error. And what does it say type 2 is? Failed to reject, right? Failed to reject the null when it is false. So that's an error. You should be rejecting the null because it was false, and you failed to reject it. That's an error. So that's a type 2 error. Okay. So what does that fit with what they're saying? They're saying from clinical trial is that the vaccination will not be approved when it indeed does reduce the risk of contracting the HIV virus. I don't know. If it reduces. So what would the null be and what would the H1 be? It's hard to decide if we don't see those. Well, the hypothesis test to see if the new reduces, what's that? Less. So that's going to go right here. Or proportion, the percentage that get the HIV. So less, right? The P is less than some number. This is always equal, right? HO is always equal. And so what would a type 2 error be? You would fail to reject the null. You would keep the null when it's really false, right? So is that what they're saying? I'm not sure. Let me see. The vaccination will not be approved. You said no to this, right? If you kept the null, you said no to this, meaning you did not agree that it's less than. You did not agree that it's working. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Do you see that? Right, this means it works. If it reduces, right, less, if it makes a less percentage have the HIV virus, right? That means it's working. And if we do a type 2 error, we're failing to reject the null, meaning we're keeping the null, rejecting the other guy, rejecting the idea that it works. So they're right. That is a type 2 error, right? The vaccination will not be approved when it actually should have been approved. It does reduce. Yes, that is a type 2 error. Those are kind of hard to track with. They're a little easier on the test. You'll see them. So if you can do these, the test will be a big joke for you. It'll be easy. All right, we okay here? Sorta? All right. Question 7. A researcher looks at the mean salaries of male and female electricians and decides based on the evidence that there is no difference between the two groups. The researcher could have met a blank in drawing that conclusion. I don't even know what the options are there.
Type 1 and type 2.
Oh, is it type 1, type 2? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So how are we going to know whether it's type 1 or type 2? Well, you've got to lay out the null and the alternative. Remember, the null is always equal. Always, every time. The null is always equal. So what would the H1 be in this case? Not equal. The opposite, huh? It's always the opposite. So the H1 would be not equals. Okay. So what did they say happened? The researcher, what did the researcher decide? Decided based on the evidence that there's no difference. So did the researcher go with HO or H1? Well, HO. Yeah. I'm getting confused too. HO. That's no difference. They're not different. They're equal. The researcher decided, right? They're equal, not different. Right? This would be different, right? Not equal means if they're not equal, they're different. Right? So the researcher went with the HO. What if that was a mistake? That's what they're saying. The researcher could have made an error. What kind of error would that be when you go with HO? Well, if you look at type 1, it says reject the null, blah, 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 blah. And type 2 says fail to reject the null. Fail to reject the null. So if we went with the null mistakenly, did we reject the null or fail to reject the null? Fail to reject the null. Type 2. How are we doing? Am I completely losing you? I'm feeling like I'm talking to myself up here. I know I'm probably moving fast. I'm wanting to get through some of these for you. But am I just going too fast? Am I totally losing you? So to do this, you got to lay out the HO and the H1. And the HO is always equals. The H1 is the opposite. And that means not different. That means different. And then you got to write out type 1, type 2, and see which case they're saying. It's kind of challenging. It's only 2 options, though. You could always go back over it. 50-50, like flipping a coin. You get 10 in a row right. You're as lucky as Mr. Herring. All right. Number 8. Food inspector inspects samples. See if they're safe. This can be blah, blah, blah. HO food is safe. Alternative. They're doing HA there. Same thing, H1, whatever. The following is an example of what type of error. The sample suggests that the food is safe, but actually it's not safe. So they did some test. They messed up. They thought the food was safe. It's actually not safe. So I think you can track this one not too badly. It's not too hard. So if they decided the food is safe, which one did they go with, HO or HA? They went with HO, right? The food is safe. They went with HO and they said no to HA if they decided the food is safe. Now they were wrong, but that's what they did, right? So which one? So what did they do? So remember the type 1. If you look back at the study sheets, the exam 3 notes, number 5, the type 1 and the type 2 errors. Type 1 says reject the null. Type 2 says fail to reject the null. So which one did they do? Did they reject the null or fail to reject the null? Yeah, they failed to. They kept the null, didn't they? They failed to reject. It's a type 2 error, isn't it? That good? Tracking a little bit easier? That's more like what I would expect on the test. That's a little more, not quite so reaching. That good? 12. A commonly cited standard for one-way length duration of school bus rides for elementary school children is 30 minutes. All right, so 30 minutes on the bus one way, on average. Local government office in a rural area conducts a study to determine if elementary schoolers in their district have a longer average one-way commute time. If they determine that the average commute time of students in their district is significantly higher than the commonly cited standard, they will invest in increasing the number of school buses to help shorten the commute time. What would a type 2 error mean in this context? Okay, so they're talking about doing a study, right? And they want to find out. So remember, you got to write if you're going to track them on their study, you got to write the HO and their H1. There's just no getting around it, and the claim. So what are they claiming? What are they looking at in the study? It says if they determine that the average commute time in their district is significantly higher. Is that equal, not equal, less, or greater? Greater. Higher is greater. So they're claiming the average, it's not a P, it's not a percentage, it's an average, is greater than whatever, right? 30. I guess it's greater than 30. That was the average. That was the average for all kids. So they're saying greater than 30. So let's write the null. So remember, these guys always have the same letter, same number. Mu, 30, 30, no change. Never change that. The HO's always equals. So what's the H1? It's got to match the claim, doesn't it? One of them has to match the claim. Okay, so what then? So that means that what is true there? What would a type 2 error mean? Type 2 error is the one where you, fail to reject, fail to reject the null when the null is false. Right? Fail to reject the null when the null is false. So you fail to reject the null. You keep the null and reject the other one. But you shouldn't have, because the null is really false. You with me? So what is really the truth here then? If that null is really false, that means the other one is really true. So what's really true? The average is greater than 30. That's what's really true. But we didn't go that way. How we doing? Am I doing the Charlie Brown teacher thing? The wah. Is this making any sense? A little complex, right? They're saying if you made an error, right? If you failed, the type 2 error means you failed to reject the null. So that means you keep the null. But they're saying it was an error. So the null is really false. And that means the other one's true. What's true? Greater than 30. The commute time really is greater than 30. All right, let's go to the questions now. The local government decides that the average commute time is 30 minutes. Well, we need something about data. It's not going to be, no, it needs something about data. Let's go. The local government decides that the data provide convincing evidence of an average commute time higher than 30. Is that what they decided? Did they decide higher than 30? No, they went with HO, equal to 30. They rejected the higher than 30. Right? So no, it's not that one. It's not that one. Let's go to the next one. The local government decides that the data do not provide convincing evidence of an average commute time higher than 30. Right, they do not believe the higher than 30. When the true average is in fact higher than 30. Yeah, exactly. Right? The true average is in fact. It's true that it's actually higher than 30, but they didn't decide that. That's a type 2 error. We good there?